Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. My wife betrayed me with my brother, the celebrated golden boy of our family, and even had his child. Predictably, my parents rallied behind him, but now that my business has flourished, they've returned, pleading for financial support. My name is Ethan, and I've always been the overlooked child in our family. Growing up, I often felt invisible, an outsider in my own home. Ryan, my younger brother, was the star, the one my parents doted on and showcased with pride at every opportunity. He was the athlete, the charming prodigy with limitless potential, basking in their constant admiration. Meanwhile, I lingered in the shadows, never truly seen. Even before I started school, their favoritism was painfully obvious. When I achieved straight A's, it barely earned a nod. But when Ryan scored a single goal in a Little League game, it sparked full-blown celebrations. My parents threw parties in his honor, and I had to sit through them, watching him soak in the glory as though he'd won an Olympic medal. I'd nibble on stale cake, questioning why I even tried. And as we grew older, the disparity only grew more glaring. When Ryan turned 16, my parents gifted him a brand new car, a shiny Ford my dad had been raving about for months. When my turn came, I was left to scrape together what little I had to buy a beat-up clunker, working weekends at a hardware store just to keep it running. College was no different. While my parents covered the full cost of Ryan's private university tuition, I was left to figure things out on my own. Not a penny came my way. Determined to succeed despite the odds, I took out student loans and worked grueling late-night shifts to survive. The financial and emotional strain was overwhelming. By my sophomore year, I was drowning in stress and overdue bills. Desperate, I swallowed my pride and turned to my parents for help. Even a small contribution could have eased my burden, but they flatly refused. "We've already invested so much in Ryan," my father explained, as though it was the most reasonable stance. "We can't afford to help both of you." They assured me I was strong and would figure it out, and somehow I did. With the help of a few loyal friends who lent me what they could, I managed to stay in school and graduate. I tried to bury those memories, hoping they would fade with time, but life wasn't finished testing me. After graduation, I found a job at a small tech startup. The pay was modest, but the experience was invaluable. I threw myself into my work, building connections and absorbing everything I could. One of my colleagues, Mike, became a close friend, and he was the one who introduced me to Jessica at a company event. Jessica was unlike anyone I'd ever met. We hit it off instantly, and within a year, we were married. For the first time, I felt truly supported, like someone finally believed in me. A few months after our wedding, I got an unexpected call from my mom. By then, I had grown used to the idea that my family didn't care about me, and I nearly ignored it. But something compelled me to answer. My mom's tone was different, gentler. She said they missed me and wanted to mend things. At first, I was wary, but as she spoke about repairing our relationship, I felt my defenses start to lower. She even sounded hurt that I hadn't told them about my wedding. "We want to be part of your life," she said, her voice laced with regret. "Jessica is family now, too." Against my better judgment, I believed her. I wanted to believe they'd changed. Jessica was excited about reconnecting with them, and I thought it might be the fresh start we needed. We started visiting occasionally, but it didn't take long for me to see that nothing had truly changed. Ryan still lived at home, unemployed and contributing nothing to the household. He occasionally helped out at the family cafe, but he was still the same spoiled, entitled person he'd always been. Meanwhile, Jessica and I were struggling to build our life. We lived in a tiny apartment, pinching every penny to save for the future. Our furniture was secondhand, and our cramped kitchen barely had room for two people to stand. I was working tirelessly to save for a reliable car and a new laptop since mine was on its last legs. Then, Jessica told me she was pregnant. The news filled me with joy and purpose. I vowed to give our child the best life possible. But as her pregnancy progressed, I noticed unsettling changes. Jessica started spending an unusual amount of time with my family, especially with Ryan. She'd visit my parents while I was at work or run errands with Ryan without telling me. Initially, I thought she was simply making an effort to bond with them, but over time, it felt wrong. The closer she got to my family, the more uneasy I became. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, but the gnawing suspicion wouldn't go away. One night, unable to suppress my doubts any longer, I picked up Jessica's phone while she slept. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages. What I discovered shattered me. Jessica and Ryan had been having an affair that began the first time we visited my parents. The messages left no room for doubt. They were explicit, detailing their ongoing betrayal. Worse, Jessica's texts revealed her plan to pass Ryan's child off as mine. She intended to keep using me for financial stability while secretly building a future with him. I sat there, stunned, rereading their vile plans. My own wife, my own brother. The depth of their betrayal was unfathomable. When I confronted Jessica, fury and heartbreak collided within me, tearing apart the life I thought I'd built. Everything I had worked for, everything I believed in, crumbled in an instant. She didn't even try to refute my accusations. Instead, her rage flared as she launched into accusations of her own, calling me paranoid, controlling, and intrusive. I shouted back, desperate for answers, but she slammed the door on any chance of resolution. Minutes later, she grabbed a bag, stormed out, and headed straight to my parents' house. Left alone, I sat in silence for hours, staring blankly at the walls, watching everything I'd built crumble into ruins. Eventually, I reached for my phone and called my parents, hoping they'd understand the absurdity of the situation. My mother answered, but her voice was cold, almost dismissive. I tried to explain what Jessica had done, but she interrupted me mid-sentence. "Ethan, I don't know what you're going on about, but you need to calm down. Jessica's already told us everything." "Everything?" I asked, stunned, my mind reeling. "Mom, she's been sleeping with Ryan. She's pregnant with his child." "Stop it, Ethan," she snapped, her irritation cutting through the line. "You're always making a scene. Jessica is here, heartbroken. She told us you drove her away with your jealousy. Ryan's been nothing but a source of support for her during this difficult time." "Support?" I spat out, disbelief choking me. "Mom, Ryan has been having an affair with my wife." "Ryan would never do that to you," she retorted sharply. "If you weren't so unstable, Jessica wouldn't have had to seek solace elsewhere. But no, you're always playing the victim." I hung up, shattered. My parents had chosen Ryan over me, again, just as they had throughout my childhood. This betrayal, however, broke something inside me that felt beyond repair. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I became a hollow version of myself, weighed down by a sense of hopelessness so heavy it was suffocating. I filed for divorce, though every step felt like wading through quicksand. Seeing Jessica in court, her composed demeanor painting her as the wounded party, made it all worse. My family rallied around her, painting me as unstable, the villain who had driven her to the edge. Even my father, distant and largely absent over the years, took her side, shaking his head in disappointment. "Ethan's always been difficult," he told the court, "always full of resentment." At first, I tried to fight back, but I simply didn't have the energy. Jessica walked away with the car and a list of possessions she demanded. I let it all go, desperate to end the nightmare. The only thing I insisted on was a DNA test for the baby, my last shot at the truth. When I brought up the DNA test, my father, Rick, called, attempting to dissuade me. His voice carried a nervous edge masked by forced laughter. "Ethan, do you really want to create more drama?" he asked. "Jessica's a good woman. The baby's yours. There's no need for this." I refused to back down. He tried everything. Excuses about cost, inconvenience, even guilt trips about embarrassing Jessica. "Do you really want to accuse your wife of lying?" he asked. None of it worked. I needed answers. When the baby was born, I followed through with the test. Weeks later, the results confirmed what I'd suspected. I wasn't the father. Relief swept over me like a tidal wave. Finally, I was free. No child support, no pretense, no ties to Jessica. I could breathe again. The DNA report, however, included a peculiar note about additional genetic details. I dismissed it at the time, too consumed by my newfound freedom to give it much thought. That detail, though, would later come back in a way I never expected. With Jessica and the chaos behind me, I threw myself into my work. The pain and anger I'd carried for years became fuel for my projects. When COVID turned the world upside down, shutting down jobs and upending stability, my friend Mike and I seized the opportunity. We transformed a fledgling online business idea into a thriving enterprise. Through long nights, relentless effort, and a stroke of luck, we succeeded. While the pandemic crippled countless businesses, ours flourished. Money poured in, more than I'd ever dreamed possible. As my success grew, my family's fortune spiraled in the opposite direction. Their cherished cafe, the backbone of their livelihood, couldn't survive the new reality. No takeout, no delivery, nothing to sustain them. Meanwhile, Ryan, the golden child, stayed home, freeloading off my parents while their business drowned in debt. He didn't lift a finger to help. Eventually, the cafe closed, leaving my family floundering in financial ruin. Desperate, they scrambled for government aid and tried every avenue to recover, but nothing worked. And then somehow, Jessica caught wind of my rising success. What happened next would upend everything. News traveled swiftly, and before I knew it, my phone was inundated with calls from my family. First, it was my parents. My mother, who hadn't contacted me in months, left a drawn-out voicemail laced with guilt. She spoke about the importance of family unity during hard times. "Ethan," she implored, her voice heavy with self-pity, "we're the family that raised you, gave you everything. You can't turn your back on us now." The irony of her words, everything, almost made me laugh. Her plea painted my success as a debt owed to them, an obligation to save them from their own mistakes. Then my father chimed in. His message carried the familiar weight of paternal judgment. He lectured me on honoring my parents and their sacrifices, as if he were delivering sage advice. I could imagine his stern expression as he said, "Ethan, you've done well for yourself. Your mother and I aren't getting any younger. It's a son's duty to support his family." His tone suggested it wasn't a request but a command, a moral directive he believed I had no right to ignore. Jessica was next in line. After years of silence following our bitter divorce, she reappeared, sugarcoating her words with charm as though our messy past had been erased. She spoke glowingly of family values, as though she were the ambassador of reconciliation. "Ethan, I know we've had our differences," she began, her voice soft and almost wistful. "But family is family, and we need to move forward. Your family needs you now." She even had the nerve to suggest I was failing to set a good example for the child who wasn't even mine. Finally, Ryan called. His casual, almost friendly tone was the cherry on top. "Hey, bro, long time, huh?" he said, as though we were catching up over beers. He quickly pivoted to his real purpose, asking for money. "Things are a bit tight here. Think you could help out? Just a loan, man. You know I'd pay you back, eventually." His easygoing demeanor was a thin veil over his desperation, and his promises rang as hollow as they always had. I reached my limit. Blocking all of them crossed my mind more than once. Their appeals to family duty were relentless, yet entirely devoid of genuine accountability. These were the same people who had ignored, dismissed, and taken advantage of me for years, now expecting me to bail them out without question. The audacity was staggering. They truly believed I would overlook their betrayals and hand over my hard-earned money. Despite the overwhelming pressure, I didn't break. I didn't drown my frustrations in alcohol or let their manipulation derail me. I focused on my work, my independence, and the future I was building for myself. But their constant demands weighed on me. The real kicker wasn't just their expectation for my help, it was their refusal to lift a finger for themselves. They saw me as their lifeline, a fix for problems they weren't willing to face. When my refusal became clear, they pivoted. Rumors began circulating, outrageous fabrications meant to tarnish my name. Friends, distant relatives, and even acquaintances were fed these stories. The most ridiculous was my father's claim that he had sacrificed his comfort to buy me a new car. A car, they said, that Ryan later inherited. The truth? That shiny new vehicle was purchased for Ryan, while I saved up for a beat-up clunker. Their lies painted them as selfless parents who had poured their hearts into my success. Reality told a different story. As these tales reached me, often accompanied by unsolicited advice about gratitude, I couldn't help but laugh at their gall. It became clear there was nothing left to salvage in our relationship. They were determined to twist reality to suit their narrative. That's when I decided it was time to take control. While going through old documents one night, I stumbled upon a DNA test from the court case with Jessica. I had held on to it for reasons I couldn't fully explain at the time, but now it seemed like fate. As I reviewed it, something stood out. Not only did it confirm I wasn't the child's father, but it also revealed no genetic link between us. None whatsoever. A realization hit me like a thunderclap. If Ryan and I were truly brothers, there should have been some genetic connection. The only plausible explanation? I wasn't biologically related to any of them. Suddenly, my entire life fell into place. The favoritism, the neglect, the indifference. It all made sense if I wasn't their blood. It became clear I must have been adopted. Perhaps they had taken me in when they couldn't have children, only to sideline me when Ryan, their miracle child, was born. The clarity was liberating. It inspired an idea, one final confrontation. I arranged a family dinner, framing it as a chance to reconcile. I hinted that financial support might be on the table, which was all it took to get them on board. We met at a lavish restaurant, the kind that screamed extravagance. I spared no expense, ordering the most luxurious dishes. They ate it up, their smiles dripping with anticipation. Throughout the meal, their behavior was impeccable, forced politeness and exaggerated warmth. It felt like I was watching a badly scripted play. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm, and asked the question that had been burning in my mind. Am I adopted? The air shifted. The room fell silent. My mother's eyes welled up with what I could only describe as rehearsed tears. My father cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. Then, the truth came spilling out. Yes, I had been adopted. They admitted to struggling with infertility before deciding to adopt me. A few years later, Ryan came along, their biological miracle child. And just like that, everything I had suspected was confirmed. Dad defended their silence by claiming it was an attempt to shield me from feeling different or ignored. The irony was almost laughable. After years of being treated as though I didn't matter, they somehow believed withholding the truth would magically repair all the damage. Then, predictably, they pivoted to declarations of love, with Ryan chiming in to share his childhood jealousy, lamenting how he always ended up with my hand-me-down clothes and toys. Their effort to rewrite the past felt absurd, as if every act of neglect could be reframed as part of some master plan to show care and respect. Then came the kicker. They said they were proud of me. Every fight, every cold shoulder they claimed, had been a deliberate strategy to build my resilience. It was, they insisted, all for my benefit. Even as their words twisted my stomach into knots, I maintained a calm exterior. I let them deliver their rehearsed lines, nodding and smiling in all the right moments, biding my time. When their performance finally concluded, I reached into my jacket and slid a sleek, polished box across the table. Their eyes lit up, brimming with anticipation as they imagined the wealth I must be offering. Inside was a shiny new bank card. I explained as nonchalantly as possible that I'd opened an account just for them. It would include regular deposits every month to support them. Their excitement was instant. Smiling and eagerly nodding, they were already calculating how much they'd gain. What they didn't know was that the account held a total of $5, $1 for each of them: Mom, Dad, Ryan, Jessica, and even the child I wasn't biologically related to. They admired the card with delight, completely unaware of the truth. As they raised their glasses to toast family, unity, and new beginnings, I felt a deep, satisfying sense of vindication. The joke, for once, was on them. The evening carried on seamlessly. They feasted on expensive dishes and fine drinks, basking in the illusion that I had embraced their narrative. At one point, I excused myself under the pretense of using the restroom. No one suspected a thing as I casually walked out of the restaurant. On my way out, I approached a waiter, explaining there was an emergency and assuring him my family at the table would settle the bill. As I stepped into the night air, an immense wave of liberation washed over me. I could already imagine their bewildered expressions when the bill arrived, their growing panic as they realized I wasn't coming back to pay. Before I even made it home, my phone began buzzing incessantly with calls. The realization had clearly set in. Soon after, notifications popped up from their futile attempts to withdraw money using the bank card. I could only picture their shock upon discovering the account balance, a grand total of $5, far from enough to cover the extravagant evening they'd just indulged in. Once home, I wasted no time blocking their numbers. As promised, I continued depositing $5 each month into the account, a small, sardonic token of support. It became a monthly reminder of how little they had ever truly valued me. As expected, they tried to reach me through mutual contacts and social media, sending desperate pleas. When I shared the story online, exposing the reality of their behavior, public backlash ensued. Scrambling to protect their image, they ultimately decided it was easier to pretend I didn't exist. I walked away with no regrets, knowing they'd been served a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Their carefully constructed facade of grandeur and self-serving narratives had crumbled, leaving them to confront the emptiness of their actions. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened and genuinely free. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Thomas awoke before dawn, his mind a whirl of thoughts divided between the demands of the day and the much-anticipated return of his wife, Amanda. She had been away on an extended business trip, leaving the house feeling achingly empty. Determined to make her homecoming perfect, he set to work. The coffee pot bubbled quietly, filling the air with a comforting aroma. The living room gleamed, spotless, with Amanda's favorite blanket folded neatly over the armchair. As the front door creaked open, morning sunlight streamed through the hallway, framing her figure like a portrait. Her smile, though touched with fatigue, radiated warmth, and Thomas crossed the room in an instant, enveloping her in a firm embrace. "Welcome home, Amanda," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. She leaned into him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. "It's so good to be back," she replied softly. After a brief moment, she pulled away and reached into her bag, retrieving a small object with a sly smile. Extending a white stick toward him, she announced with quiet excitement, "I have news." Her face broke into a wide grin as she delivered the revelation that would alter their lives forever. "I'm pregnant, Thomas." For a moment he froze, his gaze darting between the test in her hand and her beaming face. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. "Amanda, are you serious? This is incredible," he stammered, his voice unsteady as he reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. Amanda laughed, a tear glistening on her cheek as she nodded. "Yes, we're going to be parents. Isn't it amazing?" She kissed him lightly and squeezed his hand, her joy infectious. Yet, as happiness surged through him, a faint thread of unease began to coil in the back of his mind. He hesitated, voicing his concern about how distant they had seemed before her trip. Amanda waved his doubts away with a light-hearted laugh, assuring him that life often had surprising timing. She promised to make a doctor's appointment to confirm everything, her reassurances soothing him, albeit not entirely. The news occupied his thoughts throughout the day. On his commute, at his desk, even amidst the endless stream of emails and contracts, everything faded into the background. Memories of Amanda swirled in his mind, moments of joy and love mixed with flickers of doubt. He thought back to the night they met 5 years earlier, at a celebratory party following his promotion to senior manager. The room had been alive with the hum of ambition and pride. Amid the lively crowd, Amanda had stood out, laughing animatedly with Jason Palmer, one of Thomas's fiercest workplace rivals. Jason, ever the showman, had monopolized her attention, his hand resting familiarly on her arm. The rivalry between Jason and Thomas had always been intense, each vying for recognition and success. Not one to back down, Thomas had joined the conversation, effortlessly charming Amanda with his wit. She responded with a disarming ease that drew him in. Frustrated, Jason had excused himself to network elsewhere, leaving Thomas to capitalize on the opportunity. A drink turned into exchanged numbers, which led to coffee dates, dinners, and weekends exploring the city. Their connection had been instant and undeniable. A year later, beneath a moonlit sky on the beach, Thomas had proposed, pouring his heart out as Amanda's radiant smile answered with a resounding yes. They married soon after, creating a home filled with love and dreams of a shared future. Their life together had been marked by laughter, occasional disagreements, and plans for what lay ahead. Now, standing on the cusp of parenthood, Thomas wrestled with his emotions. He longed to embrace the joy of Amanda's news, but couldn't shake the nagging sense of something amiss. That evening, he returned home to find Amanda had set the stage for a romantic dinner. The warm glow of candlelight reflected off polished silverware, and the aroma of their favorite dishes filled the room. They shared stories and laughter, Amanda's joy lighting up the space. As they moved upstairs, her reassurances soothed him, her playful laughter chasing away his lingering doubts. For a moment, he let himself believe everything would be fine. But 2 days later, Amanda returned from her doctor's appointment with news that reignited his unease. "The doctor confirmed it," she said, her excitement palpable. "I'm about 4 weeks along." Thomas's heart sank. 4 weeks? He mentally retraced their time together and realized they hadn't been intimate during that period. Tentatively, he broached the subject, voicing his concern. Amanda brushed it off with a breezy laugh, her tone confident as she insisted he must have forgotten. Her explanation seemed rehearsed, smooth yet unconvincing. Though Thomas desperately wanted to trust her, the gnawing unease refused to fade. Torn between love and suspicion, he found himself grappling with a question he feared to confront. Could Amanda truly be hiding something? Thomas gave the impression of agreement, but within him, unease brewed like a storm. Each day seemed to heighten his suspicions, the weight of doubt pressing heavily on his mind. Soon his concerns became physical, a growing irritation in his groin that refused to be ignored. Distraught but secretive, he sought a doctor's opinion, keeping the matter from Amanda. The test results were a crushing blow. Thomas had contracted an STD. The diagnosis shattered any illusions he'd held, forcing him to face the fears he had tried to suppress. His lingering doubts transformed into a desperate need for clarity. One morning, while Amanda was away, Thomas seized the opportunity to dig deeper. He accessed her laptop, poring over emails and documents related to her recent business trip. Amanda had recently joined a new company, but the details he uncovered were beyond anything he had anticipated. Hidden within the travel documents was a list of attendees for the trip. One name struck him like a gut punch: Jason Palmer. It had been over a year since Thomas had thought about Jason, a former colleague who had left Thomas's company after years of quiet but palpable rivalry. Yet, here was Jason's name, entwined with Amanda's professional world. The sight of Jason's name dragged buried memories to the surface. Thomas recalled Jason's arrogance, their competitive tension, and most unsettling, Jason's overly familiar behavior around Amanda in the past. The possibility that Jason might see Amanda's new role as a way to exact revenge was impossible to ignore. Years ago, Amanda's attention had shifted to Thomas, leaving Jason clearly embittered. Could this be Jason's attempt to rekindle something with Amanda as a form of retribution? Dark thoughts swirled in Thomas's mind. Was Amanda drawn to Jason again? Were they conspiring against him? As his imagination pieced the puzzle together, the picture it painted was one of betrayal. What hurt most was the growing suspicion that Amanda might be manipulating him, not just emotionally, but financially. The idea that she could deceive him into believing a child was his, only to secure alimony and claim his assets, filled him with dread. Thomas resolved to take action. He consulted Ellen, a sharp and meticulous lawyer, along with a financial advisor to safeguard his future. Laying out his suspicions, Amanda's behavior, her connection to Jason, and the pregnancy, Thomas received a clear plan to protect himself. Ellen's approach was swift and strategic. Move assets out of Amanda's reach. The first step was creating a trust fund. This trust would legally hold Thomas's major assets, including his house, retirement savings, and investments, ensuring they were insulated from any divorce claims. His financial advisor suggested additional measures, such as transferring his savings to offshore accounts in jurisdictions with strict privacy laws, and converting a portion into tangible assets like gold and rare collectibles, making them virtually untraceable. To complicate things further for Amanda, Thomas took out a loan against the house, reducing its apparent equity. The loan funds were deposited into a secure account managed by Ellen's firm. Should Amanda aim for the house in a settlement, its reduced value would make it far less enticing. Ellen also stressed the importance of building a case. Thomas began documenting Amanda's actions, saving her communications, and gathering any evidence that linked her to Jason. This meticulous record-keeping would serve as vital proof if the situation escalated to court. To uncover the truth, Thomas hired David, a seasoned private investigator. Despite Amanda and Jason's discretion, David managed to capture telling moments: a private lunch, a meaningful exchange of glances, and an intimate conversation at a quiet cafe. The photos and videos, while subtle, suggested a connection that went far beyond professional boundaries. Armed with this evidence, Thomas was ready to move forward. He worked with Ellen to finalize divorce papers, ensuring his assets were securely protected. Then, without alerting Amanda, he packed his belongings and prepared to leave behind the life they had built together. Thomas relocated to a quiet part of the country, settling into a small, secluded hotel as he awaited the fallout. When Amanda returned from her trip, she was met with silence. At first, she assumed Thomas was simply out, but her heart sank when she noticed an envelope left conspicuously on the kitchen counter. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were finalized divorce papers, signed and sealed with no note or explanation. Amanda stood paralyzed, the realization sinking in that her world had unraveled in an instant. She made frantic attempts to contact Thomas, only to find his number disconnected. Meanwhile, Thomas disappeared into a new chapter of his life, leaving behind the lies and betrayal that had weighed so heavily on him. The ties that once bound him to Amanda were severed, allowing him to begin again. She scoured the internet for any trace of him, but it was as if Thomas had erased himself from the digital world. Desperate for answers, she reached out to mutual acquaintances, yet their responses only deepened the mystery. No one seemed to know where he had gone. Overnight he had vanished, leaving her to face the stark reality of their divorce alone. Thomas, meanwhile, was wrestling with his own inner demons. Isolated in a hotel room, he found himself drowning in a sea of anguish. Memories of betrayal and broken trust surged within him, no longer suppressed. Sleepless nights stretched endlessly, and the crushing weight of loneliness pressed heavily on him. Seeking an escape, he longed for solitude, a refuge where he could finally breathe. After days of searching, he found it, a modest cabin deep in the woods. It was simple but perfect for his needs. He resigned from his job, unable to endure the reminders of Amanda and Jason's treachery that lurked in every corner of the office. Surrounded by towering trees and boundless sky, the cabin became his sanctuary, a place to rebuild and heal. When the divorce proceedings began, Thomas avoided appearing in person, opting instead to join via video only when required. He left the heavy lifting to his meticulous lawyer, Ellen. Amanda, on the other hand, strode into court brimming with confidence, certain she held all the cards. What she didn't anticipate was the storm Thomas had prepared. He had orchestrated everything with precision, carefully placed financial protections, including trust funds, offshore accounts, and devalued property, left Amanda with nothing to claim. Her frustration was palpable as she realized the divorce documents offered her no leverage. In a desperate bid to regain control, Amanda revealed her pregnancy, hoping it might turn the tide in her favor. But Thomas was prepared for that as well. Ellen presented indisputable evidence: medical records showing Thomas had contracted an STD, damning proof of Amanda's infidelity. Photographs and videos of her with Jason cemented the case. Amanda's confidence crumbled in an instant. She had walked into court expecting to dictate the terms, but she left knowing the life she had envisioned was slipping away. Shattered, Amanda turned to Jason for solace, clinging to the hope that they could still build a future together. But his fury greeted her instead. "You've ruined everything," he hissed, his voice cold and cutting. Jason's anger was undeniable. "I trusted you to handle this discreetly," he said. "We could have taken the assets and cleaned up the mess. But no, you rushed in and wrecked everything. Now Thomas has locked us out completely." Amanda's confidence faltered as she stared at Jason, the man she thought shared her dreams. His resentment made it clear she had been little more than a pawn in his vendetta against Thomas. Desperately, she tried to remind him of their bond. "I thought you cared about me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. Jason's bitter laugh cut through her words like a knife. "This was never about love," he retorted. "You were just a means to an end. And now, thanks to your impulsiveness, it's over." When she mentioned the baby, hoping it might soften his anger, Jason's reply was merciless. "What baby?" he sneered. "Who knows who the father is? Don't even try to pin that on me." He walked away without another word, leaving Amanda devastated and alone. Years passed, and Amanda gave birth to a baby boy. With the unwavering support of her family, she began to rebuild her life. Her parents and siblings stood by her through the darkest times, helping her move forward. Yet, despite their love, a hollow ache remained. She attempted to date, but each relationship faltered. Jason had disappeared completely, and her past mistakes continued to haunt her. Often she found herself thinking of Thomas, wondering how his life had unfolded and what might have been had she made different choices. The guilt of her actions lingered, an unshakable shadow of loss and regret. Thomas, meanwhile, embraced a life far removed from the chaos of his past. Immersed in the beauty of nature, he took up solo camping and mountain climbing, documenting his adventures through videos and blog posts. His online presence flourished, attracting a devoted audience and providing a steady income. His loyal dog became his constant companion, a steadfast friend who never betrayed him. One evening, while scrolling through comments on his latest video, a message stopped him in his tracks. The words, written by a woman, struck a chord. "Thomas, I know who you are. I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I didn't know how else to reach you. I regret it all deeply." He didn't need her name to know it was Amanda. Whether by chance or deliberate searching, she had found his blog. The message stirred a storm of emotions, nostalgia, sadness, and a surprising sense of closure. Though her actions had caused him profound pain, he realized he no longer felt anger. Calmly, he typed his reply. "I hold no grudge. God will judge us. I wish you happiness." As he closed his laptop, a sense of peace washed over him. Thomas had finally made his peace with the past and was ready to move forward. Free from bitterness, he embraced the promise of hope and a future unburdened by regret. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.